Hello there, welcome to this week's edition of Fabric Friday. My name is Binga, and from time to time, I get to share new video content that helps data analysts, business analysts, or generally data professionals to becoming the best version of themselves by leveraging latest technologies, newest trends within the field of data. So before we jump into direct link, it might really be important that we sort of define the premise we're coming from, where are we coming from, and what do we have as of the moment. So right now, if you're trying to get data into Microsoft Power BI before now, there used to be primarily two type of storage modes that you have to define for getting your data onto your Microsoft Power BI. So the first mode used to be your direct query. Okay, so if you want to plug to a data source, of course, there are limited data sources that you can choose from, mostly looking at your table from your database or your list from a SharePoint list or a SharePoint folder of files as well, and a few other data sources. So they're limited. However, in your connectivity to this data source with a direct query, what it seems to achieve is to give an almost real-time experience of your data. However, there are a few cons to this. One of the major disadvantage here is the fact that performance will be greatly impaired, okay, because you're connecting directly into a production environment, for instance. So what happens is that as you're fetching reports from your data source, your Power BI write under the hood for you, write some query for you. Okay, so and this query are hitting against or are hitting directly on the production environment. Okay, so yes, you're going to gain some and you're going to lose obviously a few things. And then if we are not to go with the direct query, you probably want to check with an import mode, connectivity mode. And in this case, right, you can be rest assured that yes, there will be improvement in performance. You're able to fetch your reports. Your stakeholders are able to fetch reports very quickly. However, a few downsides to this, one of the major downsides will be the fact that this causes a major duplication issue with your data source. Okay, so because what it means is that you're copying what you have in your data source and duplicating that on the Power BI report server. The second thing also is that you have only a limited storage space based on your license, right? As to what is the capacity of the storage mode that you could have within your import mode. And of course, you can rest assured that the need for you to also keep your data source, I mean, keep your data set on Power BI updated will require that you either schedule an automatic refresh or do a manual incremental refresh, which can really uh, hit into the processing of your report, can hit into the readiness of your report as well. All right, so let's get into the labs. All right, the first thing we want to do, right, will be to create the workspace. Define the workspace, create the lakehouse, and try and ingest some data into our lakehouse before we start creating or before we start leveraging the capability of direct lake within data lake within the Microsoft Fabric. So of course, you know that to access your Fabric, you always go to your powerbi.com service. Within your Power BI, you will be able to see the different personas on Microsoft Fabric if you click on the Power BI button at the bottom left corner within your Power BI service. There you'll be able to see all the personas within the Microsoft Fabric. Okay, so let's go ahead to create a workspace. So if I come to workspaces, you'll see that we can then go ahead to then, of course, create a workspace. So if I come to a new workspace, let's define this as Fabric Friday. Data lake. Okay, so We then just go ahead, apply that. So now that we've applied that, you see that we don't see anything here, and that's because we're currently on the Microsoft Power BI, um, persona. So we need to change that persona to a data engineering persona. So I'll click on data engineering. Within the data engineering, okay, so recall that we say that, the best route to accessing the direct lake mode would be to either ingest data from, to your data warehouse or your lakehouse. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to use the lakehouse. So I'm going to create a new lakehouse, and we're going to call this direct data lake. Right, so I'm creating a new lakehouse. So the lakehouse has now been created. We're going to then now try and ingest some data into our files. Okay, so on the files folder under your Explorer, so there's some more options there. Click on the more options and you can say upload files. The other route to extend the additional capabilities of ingesting data into your data files table will be to also use the get data option. So if we go to get data option icon itself, from the get data option, you're going to see here how you can define new data pipelines. So if I pick new data pipeline, data lake, or we say direct data lake pipeline, and we create. So these are the various options, okay, which is again, if familiar, you're probably familiar with the data sources on your Microsoft Power BI desktop, so you get the same near experience within this place. But I'm not going to do this. We're going to probably look at this in some other videos to come. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead to close this and directly import from our local PC. So we go back to, can delete that pipeline. We go back to this lakehouse that we're working on before. Okay, and we go on to upload files, and then browse the file on my system, pick the others table. I'm going to leave this sample file also for you to practice in the description of this video. Okay, make sure you watch out for the video description. You'll find the file there. So once you then go ahead and upload, if I go on, for instance, to upload an additional file, which could be like could come as a dimension table, okay, to the people. For instance, if we go into the people table and I open that, and I get to upload the people table. So the people table could then be or act as a dimension table to the single fact table within others. So we created, or rather we've ingested this data under the files. So, and of course, if you can also look at each file, you'll be able to see, if I click on each file, you'll be able to see, like a quick preview of the data within, or the records that are within this data set. Okay, so this might take some time based on the size, depends totally on the size of the records you have in that database, in that file. So we've gotten a view of this. So I'm just going to go back to files, and we want to now load the data, right? So I'm going to load this data sets, which are still in a CSV format, into my Power BI, into my, my tables, and that converts them, from a single flat file into a delta table. So to do that or demonstrate that, I'm just going to come to more options for each of them, and I'm going to click load to table. So we can simply retain the names as it is, but bear in mind that if the file you're trying to ingest into the delta table have space in between them, that will obviously allow you to do that. So you want to take note of that, to separate the spaces with an underscore. So I'm going to click load. So that's currently being loaded. I'm just going to go ahead to load the other one, load to table. Okay, so now we need to wait for the first one, to finish loading into the table. And then the moment that is done, you will be able to click the second load. I think, personal opinion, I think Microsoft needs to work on the possibility of converting multiple, files into delta table at the same time. Because what I get here right now is that you won't be able to, to get load into data table multiple files as it were. So just go into load the second one. So notice now that we already have the first one loaded into our tables, and if you can expand it, you'll be able to see all the records, all the columns that are within this table. Okay, so and as I said, the properties that is defined for the tables here is a delta table. How do I know that? So if you click on the orders, okay, and you come to properties, you would see here that this is a delta file. So this is more or less like an abstraction of your table. All right, I did mention this also in the previous video. Okay, I explained briefly what this really mean in my previous video. Make sure you check that video for the last series on Fabric Friday. So we have the two tables loaded. Now we want to create, and we are rest assured that whatever changes that happen. So typically, what happens is that you're going to get the data, create a data pipeline, and then point that pipeline to, it could be on your S3 on Amazon, it could be on your, it could be on your database and all that. So you don't need to then define how you want to connect to it. Unlike you would do typically within your Microsoft Power BI desktop. So if you're connecting to a database, for instance, you have to define whether you want it as data, whether you want that file as direct query or import mode. But what we get now on direct lake, all right, or direct data type, direct data lake mode is the fact that the connectivity is seamless. I don't need to do incremental refresh. I don't need to worry about storage. All of this is handled entirely within the Microsoft Fabric orchestration, as well as management of your files within your Delta table. So we want to you want to then go ahead now to build a new Power BI dataset on top of the tables that we've ingested into our tables, the Delta tables. So if I come to my new Power BI set, new Power BI dataset. You then choose what tables you want to work on within your Microsoft Power BI. So I want to select everything because again, we are related. Okay, they have relationship. So if I then click on that to select, it's going to then open to us now the Power BI data model. Okay, so it's going to load the Power BI data model. So this is a model view in your data. If you're familiar with Microsoft Power BI, you see that this is your view. This is your model view within your data, within your Power BI data set or Power BI desktop. So you do need, at this point, you do need to have a valid, or you need to have a Microsoft Power BI license, at least a pro license, okay, a Power BI pro license at a minimum for you to be able to make changes within this particular data model view. So because for instance, if I look at my people table and I look at my region table, my people table and my orders, you see that the relationship here will be the region to region. So if I drag my region and I drop it on region, I get to see that this is a many to one relationship, which is fine. But then the moment you click on confirm, if you don't have a valid Power BI Pro license at the minimum, you would not be able to make those model changes. Okay, just for your um, notice. So I'm just going to cancel that. Okay, I'll just assume that we're going to work within one single table, which is the orders table on our Power BI. Okay, and then if you want to do any direct distinction, we can create them individually from each table as well. But again, if you have a pro license or a premium license per user or per, per user, okay, you should be able to then create a data model, that would act as a roll up for the orders table. So I'm going to go ahead now with that, with those points in mind. I'm going to go ahead to click on new report. So this is going to open directly into our report view on Power BI. So we have the new report view on Power BI. We can then go ahead to start building our reports. So let's quickly build the matrix. So for the matrix, I'm going to use multi-row card. And for the matrix, I'm interested in looking at the sales, the total sales. So I'll check sales. I'm interested in looking at the profit. I'll put profit. I also want to see the discount as well, and perhaps the total product. So we have product name so that we can get the total product. We're actually going to use product ID to define number of products. So for the product ID, I'm just going to come here to change it to count things. Okay. And we would have this as total sale. Profit. We're going to have discount. And we're going to have total products. We're going to say volume. Total products. As a matter of fact, I think I want to also add quantity. Let's add quantity as part of the measures. So measures, this becomes volume of sales. Right, so we have this matrix within our data sets. So let's quickly create some distinction for them. And of course, we can go ahead to just add some details for the cards. Okay, so, and then for the background color, we're going to keep that as it is, but only that we want to add some colored values. We want to reduce this. Let's reduce the color value as well as the label. Okay, so we have this result as well as the matrix or the KPIs for this. Okay, so we've just built the cards, and let's go ahead to add a few other visuals. So if I'm looking at the stacked column bar chart, and I'm interested in looking at the segments. So we do segments by sales and quantity right? So we have this, visual, okay? So we have this visual, and let me quickly let's format this. So the grid line, we want to turn off the grid line first. We want to remove the bottom legend. So I want to remove the legend. I want to also, for the x-axis, I want to remove the x-axis as well as the title for the y-axis. Okay, so with that done, we want to remove the headers for the title or modify the header title to say sales distribution, sales and quantity, sales and volume of sales distribution by segment. Okay, and the values, we want to add those values within the visual. So if I come to my data labels, so turn on the data labels, yeah, so that gives us that value that we're looking for as a way. And as a matter of fact, perhaps for the title, let's try and bring the title, make it smaller, okay, and then bring it to the center. And lastly, let's change the colon. Okay, let's minimize and change the colon, which is a bars. We have this could be this color, and then that could be a blue. Okay, so we have this, and actually for the y-axis, x-axis, I'm going to turn off the title first and then turn off this. Okay, so we have this, and let's go ahead to add a few more things. So we have the gauge. So let's have a gauge to show us if we are meeting targets or not for each year. So for this, I want to measure first the sales. So we have the sales. We find here. Let's quickly customize that. So if we're saying here is that the target label, okay, is on. So what we want to ensure that we have is the gauge analysis. So if we're saying that the minimum we should be making every year, okay, should be we should be making anywhere lower than a 500k, or let's even say we should be making anywhere less than 100,000 as the minimum sales, $100,000 or pounds, and the maximum we could make based on trends that we've seen. We're making, let's say, every year we're making maximum of 3 million. Three, okay, you have to be sure what you have in your data set, and then let's set the target. So our target for each year should not be anywhere lower than a 500,000. Okay, so then we can define the colors for the fill. Okay, so let's define the fill as that, and then define the target color as the blue. So define that as blue, and what happens is that we can also add the label for the gauge analysis. Data labels should reduce, and I want to change the data label to black, so we have black in there. And that's not all. We can also look at the general title. Okay, we call this sales target. Sales target performance. We can actually call that versus performance, and we reduce this and we change this to the center. Okay, and get the for the third one. So let's get a trend between profits and the the sales. So I'm just going to do that with this. So first we want to get the profits, and then we want to get the sales, and we want to see them by, let's see them by, let's see them by date. Let's see other dates. Okay, so we're seeing them by dates, which is the other date, and we're actually going to just modify this, go to the y-axis, remove the title on that x-axis, remove the x-axis also itself, and so that, because right now we have a challenge with being able to turn the other date into date calendar because of the limited because it's a free license, so we're unable to modify what we see for the data model. A way outside is also could have been to create a calendar table and use the calendar table, but again you will still need to be able to modify your data model. All right, you need a license to be able to do that. So we're going to then go back to the y-axis. Okay, so let's also remove first the y-axis. All right, we turn that on, rather let's remove the title for y-axis before we turn off the y-axis itself. Legend, we want to keep legend. Okay, we would come back to legend later, so let's keep legend. Let's check that there are no grid line. There are no grid lines indeed. Now the lines itself, we want to change the colors. Okay, so the first, which is the sales, I think for sales, we're always using the red. So we're going for the red. And for the profits, we're always using the blue for profits. Okay, so if you want to shade that area, you can, shade that tone down. Okay, so that it gets a bit darker that you have right here. I'm just then going to add the, the, the markers and then add the data labels on top of each marker. Let's change the data label values to white. Okay, and turn off the marker actually. So I'm going to turn off the marker and we're going to see those values. And then perhaps we can check what black looks like, a deep blue, what that looks like. And I think that's not bad. All right, so let's just reduce this to 8. And we have our solution. So just added a background color, a bit of background color to that. Okay, so we just modify that. And of course, we can always look at the trend as a way, okay, between points to points. So what we will then do, okay, so that we can have that full space is to extend this to the entire end of this sheet and obviously take this up a bit so that we can have a bit of space also a bit, and that shows us that particular value. So if we're interested, of course, in looking at the trend, we can always add, perhaps we can always add like a play button. Okay, so if I check here, let's get more visual. Let's add a play button actually so that we can see some trend here. Play button. So let's say play button, and that's a play axis there. So if I had that, and we click add, so it's added. So let's see how we can bring in the play button for this field. So for the play button, the data field that we want to add there should be the order date. So let's just add the order date. And then let's modify the play button. Animation. Let's have, as one, well, let's check what 1000 looks like first. And let's change the color, the default color for the play button to this. And remove the caption, remove the title as well. So at least we have some space that we can keep this somewhere here. So I'm going to keep this play button somewhere here and actually reduce this. All right. So if we play, all right, if we play, we get to see the trend, all right, as it's changing from date to date within our data points as it were. So we also, of course, get to see how we can fast track that. So I can always fast track the dates or the time by just adding the loops. Okay, so we can add a loop to say do it every time again and then. So what this means is that we then able to, of course, modify all the content before we then have this available to our audience. We can add all the various customizations we want to add for the purpose of report creation. So, but the good thing here is the fact that we would not again have to worry with the need to do incremental reset or incremental refresh or define how we want to refresh our data set, in our Power BI. If we're to use things like your import mode before now, would also not need to deal with the performance issue with having to have a direct mode connectivity or connection to our data sources as it were. So I want to believe that with this, you want to explore also for yourself and see the benefit that comes with these possibilities. With this, we've come to the end of this session on Fabric Friday. Join me again next week with another episode. See you until then.